Yes, we're happy to welcome you. Orbit, just a few notes on our company. Orbit is a venture builder, and what we do is building ventures, but what does that mean? So most of the time we have corporate partners who join us and they come with a problem, and we try to find a solution together with them. So there's a discovery phase about what kind of a digital project can we build with you, and then we actually kick off that product with an MVP, and in best case, they at some point take it over and start a startup. So that's approximately what Orbit does. And we also are hosting tech meetups. And this is our 5th one today. And it's a crossover together with the Women Techmakers, which is also a meetup group in Hamburg. I'm going to join the QR codes in a second. But first of all, it's about networking. And when you network, please remember, if you form a circle, to just leave a bit of space so that everyone who wants to join you can just join and talk to you. And now you can scan the meetup groups and join them and like them and share them so that you don't miss any of our meetups. But we will also put that on the screen later on. Now, why are we all here? It has to do with the 28th of June of 2025. And does anybody know what's happening on that date? Some. It has to do with accessibility, because that's why we're here today. So from the 28th of June on, every company will have to be digitally accessible. So every one of us has to, until then, fulfill some criteria, because what's happening right now is that 1 billion people can't use the websites because they have disabilities. And I myself, I can't really imagine what 1 billion people looks like. But if you look into other numbers, there's this one, which says that 97% of websites have almost always basically easily fixable errors that make them not accessible to everyone, which on the other hand means that 3% or only 3% of the entire internet is accessible, which is a very, very low number. I wouldn't have guessed it that way, but that's what it is. So today we talk about accessibility, and what does accessibility mean? And that really pretty much depends on the context of you as a person. So who are you, what are your needs, and what kind of context or abilities do you have, or which one do you not have? And that's why, just as an introduction, I brought a couple of personas so that we think about these different personas and what they might need. So the first one is Maria. She is a senior citizen. I don't know why that's not full screen, but just ignore the black around it. And her eyes are not that good anymore, her ears are not that good anymore, and that makes her often use a screen reader or even text-to-speech. And for her, it's often about the ease of use, and also she needs accessibility features so that she can use vision and hearing impairments. And I mean, we will all end up there, so maybe we start building the websites the way we will need it. This is Jin, and Jin is a very busy parent. He has 3 kids, and he's always juggling work and family responsibilities. And often, I mean, in this case, he's using a laptop, but normally he's using a smartphone and in noisy environments because he's, for example, running errands. And that means that he needs mobile-friendly application, also easy to understand content so that he can get off the smartphone again once he read it, and he needs quick loading times. Amina, she is a student with dyslexia. That means that she's struggling with reading and writing texts. So what she, for example, would need to have or likes to have is the option to switch the text to a simpler version so that it's easier for her to understand it. And in general, it's about readability and cognitive accessibility. And she as well, same as Maria, tends to use text-to-speech because it's way easier for her to listen to information. Carlos, on the other hand, he's in a wheelchair after a car accident, and he has permanent physical disabilities, which means he can't really move yet, and also his hands are not yet doing what he wants them to do. So he's also using speech recognition and keyboard navigation to access websites and do what he needs to do. There's not only this permanent physical disability, but also a temporarily disabled person like Liam, who broke his dominant arm. So now he tends to use voice commands and needs simple and one-handed navigation to work, as well as easy scroll options. And in best case, he just has to click a single time to access specific functionality. Then we have Johnny. Johnny is in the autism spectrum, and he's very sensitive and is easily overloaded. For example, if there's a lot of visual and also auditory information that he has to digest. So he wants websites to be very minimalistic, a simple design, and also if there's animations, he either tries to remove them or disable them. And also if there's lots of pop-ups or flashing, he's going to leave the website pretty early because he's getting headaches from that. On the other hand, maybe a bit of the contrast is the Tyler. He is very easily distracted and needs websites to really, or stick to that information, to be really engaging with a lot of multimedia content. He needs interactive features, and he really much likes visual appeal, so it has to be modern and dynamic design. And then there's Rachel. She can't really distinguish red and green very well, so she needs color contrast, maybe even an option to adjust the colors, and also labels describing something, and not the colors being the only information transferring specific data. So in my case, you might have wondered why I'm having these slides. This would even be a better thing for her, because she couldn't know that the red ones are red and the green ones are green. So adding these emojis describing the content as labels would, for her, make the information actually accessible. And this is only one tool that I was using in the presentation. And we are very happy that Sabrina is here today. Sabrina has made accessibility a bit of her passion project, and she's going to share lots of more tools with us, what we can do to make the web more accessible. So warm welcome.
Yes, so again, thank you very much. Thanks Orbit for hosting us today, and thank you Women Techmakers for the organization. It's the second one in Hamburg now, and I'm excited to see what's coming next year. There will be more events. However, today everything is about accessibility, and I'm gonna present a topic that maybe causes a bit of discussion or maybe makes you wonder about some things. Yeah, I'll be guiding you through a topic that is called Adding Accessibility Made It Worse, but why? So first of all, whom of you is like an experienced web developer or like did something with web development before? And who worked with accessibility before? Okay, and now lift your hand if you're like, I never did anything with anything ever. Like there's no way I'm gonna do web development or accessibility. Okay, no one, just for the live stream. Okay, very good. However, even if you haven't done anything with web or accessibility, there will be some slides that will be interesting for you, so that's why I was just checking beforehand. So let's start a little bit with the importance of accessibility. So why am I actually giving this talk, and what do I want to actually tell you about? So Alan already showed you some persona and told you why it's important for those people, but also for everyone, that we have to have an accessible web. I'm going to give you a little example on something that can happen, and I'm talking about digitalization here, the absolute favorite topic of Germany or European areas. Let's do everything on the digital side, right? So there was a time when I broke my shoulder and I couldn't like move my upper body. Someone's laughing here because they knew back then how it looked like. Like I couldn't really move my whole upper body. I couldn't lift my hands and all of that. So I also couldn't touch a keyboard, for example. However, when something like that happened to you, but also like regularly when you get ill, something, you have to call a doctor. And nowadays when you call a doctor, it's very often happening that you stay in the line for a very long time. It's also when you call a service of like a post office or something. So you stay in the line for a very long time, waiting for something to happen. And in the end, it just told me like, oh, please make an appointment online. And that happens more often, like with a lot of services nowadays. So you try to enter the website. And what you have to do, of course, either you have to log in because the service, like what you need to do is log in, or you have to register, or like in any way you have to put your name or your email somehow. And what's happening at that point is you might think, yeah, but whatever, works for me. But back then, with my shoulder, it really didn't work for me. Like I can put a phone on my table, press like, oh, please speak out loud, and then call someone, but I could really not like move around on a website. And then like 1 or 2 months later, what happened is like I could lift my arms a bit and use the keyboard. And that was an experience I never had before because I never thought of someone could not use a mouse actually. Like it didn't come to my mind. But it was really like that it was way easier for me to use the keyboard right before using the mouse. It took me like, I think 6 months or something until I could first touch the mouse again. So why is it important, accessibility? Well, first of all, content should be accessible to everyone. This means I can tell you if I give you an accessible website and non-accessible website, from the user experience point of view, I know which one you will prefer. It's always the easier one, and it's the one that's accessible. But also, things can happen in life, or things already happened in life, and for that point in time, it should be possible for you to do whatever happens. Digitalization, everything goes online, and we should always be able to use everything. Also, as Alan said, at one point we always get old. That's what I usually say. Like, even if you're sitting here like, not going to happen to me, not my problem, I'm not one of that % in the world. One day you'll be old, and we're like a really digitalized world. We want to use the things we use today also in a few years. Like, it's not gonna, I'm sure you want to visit your favorite websites in a few years as well. So when is it that usually people become aware about accessibility? Well, one thing is that they probably learned about it somewhere. So maybe you took a web development course or like app development course and something was about accessibility there, or you maybe even an accessibility course, or you read an article about it and there were some exercises or something like that. More often it happens that someone tells you about it. Like me right now, I tell you there's accessibility. Like Ellen just did, like I know some other people do on conferences, there are meetups, or there's like a YouTube video where someone tells you, oh, accessibility is important, and you'll be like, great, now I know, now I'm going home, thanks you. Then, of course, we show statistics. You've seen that before, and I do the same usually. Like, there's 1.3 billion people who have disabilities, who need accessibilities. There's like not a lot of websites that are accessible, and then we keep going like that. We try to convince with numbers always. However, what is more effective, and that's what I just told you, is that you either have a disability, can be temporary, can be for a longer time, or you know someone who has a disability. I have a friend, his father had an eye disease and he started to be blind, and he couldn't use a screen reader or access any content online. So in that point, you also become aware of accessibility, of course. However, if all of that hadn't happened, at one point you're working for a company and then the law tells you it's necessary. And that's like the most thing that I like actually experienced, that companies or people come and say, oh, you know, we get some funding from the German government and now we have to make our project accessible. Maybe you can help us. So, and it's not like they're really interested in it. They just know the law tells us to do that. And so we do it. Little comparison for that to coronavirus. You know, back then, when we actually had coronavirus, like we heard about it the first time in China, we were like, oh, something is happening. I hear about it, but I don't know what it really is or what's going to happen next, right? So no one was really like, okay, this is going to affect me or my life, actually. But then after a while, some cases came to Europe. Then after a while, some cases came to Germany, and people become more concerned about it. Like, okay, maybe it is a thing, but I don't really know still like what's going on. Until the point like when someone actually got infected, like maybe someone from family, friends, and you were like, oh, maybe it's a big thing. And also politics, like people started to talk about it, show you statistics, and you became aware about it because like it became more public, the number got higher, and it got like more into the point of interest of people, and also it had to be because like a lot of people got infected. So someone recommended to wear a mask. How many people started to wear a mask at the beginning? Some were like super scared, and they're like, oh, I really want to do everything right, and it's ethical. I don't want to infect other people. I don't want to like make a risk to my family, to myself. So I just started wearing a mask. And then after a while, some people were like, you know, I don't want to do that. I don't need that, whatever. So it was like rarely seen. Like, I don't know the percentage. I don't want to say 50-50, but some were wearing masks, some were like, whatever. Until the numbers got higher, it got worse, and at some point, politics were like, okay, everyone, you don't want to listen, here's a law. It actually wasn't really a law because they were, you know. But then they said, you have to wear a mask. And now people were like, okay. I remember going to a supermarket, suddenly everyone was wearing a mask, and everyone was like, whoa, what's going on? We really have to wear a mask. And there were still people saying, I'm not gonna do that, I'm not gonna do that, it's against that and this. And that's actually how I feel about accessibility, you know. Like even if they tell you in the law, I can tell you saying that like, oh, there's a law coming up and it says that, and people are like, am I really infected by that? Do I really have to do that? And I'm like, oh, just if you have like 10 employees and making 2 million a year, then I'm not gonna do it. And I say, oh, but the law is gonna change and da da da, and they'd be like, yeah, I'm not gonna do this until I have to. So, what are the law considerations we have to keep in mind for that? Ever heard of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? I know. So the Web Content Accessibility Guideline is not a law, but these are guidelines. So they are published or like kind of worked on from the World Wide Web Consortium, from different organizations, companies, and individuals, and they update and work on them, publish them regularly. And what they do is like they have different success criteria. So they put up different things you have to do to make accessible, like for example, take care of contrast ratios of colors, foreground, background, or making text readable, add like text to videos so everyone can read or see or hear them. So when thinking of making a website accessible, and especially to actually come along with the law, you have to think of these 3 levels. So it's level A, and AAA. And if you have like a certain amount of criteria passed, you have a basic accessible website, and that means you have level A. If you have even more success criteria, so even more things are accessible on your website, you end up with AA. And then like you have the highest one, AA, like everything's super accessible no matter what content you do have and like no matter what you're doing there. Which is hard to reach actually, but reach high, you know, reach the goal high. So for the law, they're actually looking at the guidelines, like the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and they say if you end up here, like you pass that, and you end up in the middle with AA, you're good to go and you're actually confirmed to the law. So what different laws do we have? In the US, we do have a law that is called American Disability Act. It's against discrimination in general, and sometimes in front of the court it actually got decided that websites are included in that topic. Then we have the Rehabilitation Act, and that's 504 and 508. And then in the European Union, so that's like for federal agencies, for example, they have to have accessible websites already. And then we have the European Accessibility Act, and that just got renewed. That's what Alan just told you about. It's next year is the deadline for that. And when the European Union adjusts something, as we are in the European Union, Germany, we have to adjust something as well. So we do have Barrierefreiheitsgrundgesetz plus Barrierefreiheitsinformationstechnikverordnung. German is way harder than English always. And that will be adjusted, and the Barrierefreiheitsgrundgesetz will be published next year. So it will be updated, and that, as I already said, will affect a lot of companies, and it's the biggest renewal that ever happened to accessibility laws, actually. Because it's the first time, actually, that companies will have to take care of accessibility in such a big way. So e-commerce companies, for example, like companies that sell products to everyone or that offer services or banking systems and things like that, have to be overall accessible and reach this AA level. And also, it's the first time, like also mobile phones or different other devices have to be overall accessible. And it's the first time that it's going actually into the private or in the company sector and not just federal agencies or government organizational things. And also, like, I think a lot of people start to think, and I also think that's the way it's going soon, that this will be worked on more often. So we have a huge step now, but also I think private websites could be included at some point. And as I said, like in coronavirus, we make it step by step, and until everyone is not wearing a mask, we stay home for a long time for Christmas and see no one. So I think at some point they will also add private websites, so it's a good way or a good time to start with it, actually. So yeah, as I said, that's the point where everyone wakes up and the company is like, okay, let us implement accessibility now, everyone. We have to do it now. And yeah, who's the first one who's involved in that? The designer. Designer is always the person who comes first when creating a website. And the designer is, yeah, what can I say, a creative person. He always wants to add his own note. Like when he's designing something, he's about colors, he's about different layouts, and he likes to make everything super, not fancy, but it has to look pretty. I know discussion with designers are always like, no, it has to be there. And then you're like, no, it's not possible that way. And but they really figured things out and they thought that through and they really want to have it that way. So yeah, now you come around the corner and you'll be like, okay, but everything has to be accessible now. And the designer's like, this means I cannot use my colors. And you know, there's always these popular color themes, and they be like, well, I want to use that color theme because of this and that. I also know clients reaching out to designers being like, oh no, I want you to use this and that color. And that wouldn't be possible in this situation because you have to adjust them to have that certain contrast ratio with the text. Though I gotta say, like they're really, really good color contrasts that look very well. It's just for the first time when you tell someone you cannot do this and that, they be like, I'm not gonna do that. I had that in another presentation, and then afterward everyone told me they're using material design colors, which are all accessible, and they look very good. Yeah, so there was a talk in accessibility conference in Toronto where the accessibility engineering lead at Google said, for every hour UX designer invests into accessibility, we save up to 4 hours post-launch not fixing accessibility issues. So it's a big thing to keep in mind, actually, when starting with the process of working on accessibility. The next one involved here, designer, is the project manager, product owner. It's always the one having the deadlines in mind. It's the one who wants to show the newest features to the client, who wants to release because the product has to keep going. And as accessibility can turn up as being something that people think it's extra work and they don't have like the freedom to do whatever they want, he's like, maybe we do that later. Or maybe we can just add it in the end because, you know, we have to release that feature, we have to work on this and that, and it's more important. And it's always more important than accessibility. And yeah, the last but not least, the developer. There are a lot of developers, also designers and project and product managers, owner, that are aware of accessibility. I don't want to be too negative here, but there are also developers who say, oh, but why should I change that? Like it always worked like that. I've been doing that for years and it looks good like that. Or also they want to do like the newest, freshest things, and maybe more 3D things and it's not accessible and they don't know how to figure out how to make it accessible, and they be like, oh, I don't really want to do that. So yeah, we end up with the development and the progress. So we have our whole way of making an application. And when you ask people, like, what do you think? When do you have to make your website accessible? Like, when do you have to add accessibility? Most people would probably think that. They know they have to add it right at the beginning. They have to think of making website accessible. Usually they are aware of it. And yeah, so they know how it actually should be set up. But how it actually turns out is mostly that. They start like doing the whole development process, and then in the end they be like, oh yeah, let's do accessibility later. Let's do that later. And then in the end they say, now we have to add accessibility. But how it actually should be done is not like that, because it's not some magic you can add in the end. And that's like the way of wrong thinking about accessibility. Like, I hear that so often, like, oh, we just created that feature, now can you make it accessible? Like, yeah, sure, let's add the magic in the end, and now it's accessible. Actually, it's not working like that, because when you really want to make a feature or a whole website accessible, you have to do it along the whole way. And best thing is to start right from the beginning and then create an accessible experience all over. Because you gotta imagine you write a line of code, and you say, oh yeah, I'd make that accessible later, but usually you have to rewrite the whole code, because it's not just, oh yeah, I add this and that, and now it's accessible. You have to really think the whole structure through. You have to think through the layout, you have the colors and everything. So making website accessible is a whole process, and it should be integrated along the whole way. Of course, you can always add accessibility in, but that's extra work you shouldn't do. So yeah, let's look at some failures. Or maybe I can show you the report. I didn't do that last time. So there's a WebAIM report from 2023, and it's the report of the accessibility of the top 1 million homepages. And do I come back here? Yes, and it shows like the common mistakes or like the most failures website actually do have. And the biggest one is actually low contrast text. And the second one, I summed that up a bit. It's missing alternative text, empty links, and missing form labels, which is all kind of labeling elements, or also empty buttons, also labeling elements, and missing document language, which is important for assistive technology.
What are empty links?
I will show that in a minute, but it's like you have an opening and a closing tag, and between that is usually some text. And if that's not there, it's an empty link. Actually, the content is missing. Okay, so we start with contrast. Here I have a question. So who thinks that the foreground and the background color is accessible? So I start with this one first. Who thinks that this one is accessible? Yes. And who thinks that the violet one is accessible? Okay. Who thinks that the pink one is accessible? No one, by the way. And who thinks that the green one is accessible? Okay, so I checked that with Chrome DevTools, which has an algorithm which also caused a lot of discussion lately. However, there are calculations that will be used. And as I said, there will be a law, or the law will be adjusted, and they will have to check somehow if the contrast is working or not. And they will use some sort of algorithm or tools like that. And according to that, the only one that is accessible is the blue one. Why do I show you that? It's not often easy to tell actually which is the right contrast. Neither for the designer, neither for people who are like looking on your website, neither for the developer or anyone else. Like, it's really sometimes hard to figure out. Like, I would have imagined that to be accessible. And actually, if you just make the background color just slightly darker, you wouldn't probably not even notice it's already accessible. But it can happen that it's still easy to see for a lot of people. But maybe in certain criteria, like very bright lights or something like that, and you already have an eye disease or something, it can turn out to be wrong. Just because you can see it, it doesn't mean that everyone else can see it.
When you say accessibility,
And it's AA, because I'm talking about the one that's confirmed with the law. And here it says, like when you use the tool in Chrome DevTools and you inspect something, you can also see it's AA here. And sometimes it's also showing 3A, like when you're going more into DevTools. So I tried to correct the pink one to make it accessible. You know, I was just like playing a bit with the colors because I want my website to be accessible. So this is like the original one. Now the question is, who thinks number 1 is accessible? So it's only one person in the room thinking that, including me, it's 2. I stay with you. Who thinks the second one is accessible? So I think everyone. Who thinks the third one is accessible? No one. Oh, 2. Me and another person. And the fourth one? Okay, some. I think more than 50%. So the answer to that is that actually just the ones at the top, 1 and 2, are accessible. So 100 points for you, to Gryffindor. And the ones at the bottom, according to the tool, are not to AA. You know? Why?
Why is the first one accessible, but the fourth one higher?
This one is, it also according to if you have small or big text, and also this is a lighter background. That is.
Is the size of the text also considered?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Can you repeat the question for the live stream?
Yes, she said why. And then she said, why is that happening? And then she said, why is that accessible and this one not? But this one's actually brighter background, and the text is bigger, and this one has smaller background. Smaller text, but the background, the color is more intense. Right?
And is the text size also considered
in the tool?
Yeah.
Usually, yes. In this case, I'm not sure because I don't remember actually. Do you remember?
I think it's 12 point.
I think.
The size where they cut it out was 14.
Yeah, I think it's not considered for all levels, but I think it is considered. But there is one that is going really deep from WCAG. I'm German. I say W for we. That's wrong. Yeah, that's going like really deep into the sizes as well, and can really tell you which one has which.
Is there a tool that can check whether my presentation, like PowerPoint, is accessible?
Yes, it's built in PowerPoint.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would leave questions to the end. Actually, is it according to, like, is it super important for this one?
No, it's okay.
Sure. Okay.
I'm just wondering, can in some cases make a bigger font size make up for weaker contrast, or doesn't it work that way?
Yeah, it depends on the colors, but usually I would say it would improve the contrast, the bigger font size, but it really matters. Like, it can still be like doing nothing. If you have like a really light background and then white color, you can make it as big as you want, will never have the right contrast. Yeah. So usually I think bigger sizes, like font sizes, will usually make better contrast. But in general, like if you just choose the wrong colors, and I'm gonna say like it was really popular to use pastel tones. It was so popular, it was like really not accessible in a lot of cases. Yeah. All right. So that was just a comparison. But yeah, as I said, these were the ones that were accessible, and these were not accessible according to the tool. So now again, who thinks that none of them is accessible? One person, maybe 2. Who thinks that 2 of them are accessible? So few people. Who thinks that all of them are accessible? Okay. Well, I don't have the answer here, but I tell you, it's all of them. You can prove it at home. Make a picture. Yeah, I'm a bit sad there are people who saw that talk before. All accessible, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to alternative text. Alternative text is like, for example, when you have an image that is not displayed and it's describing the image then very well, or like labeling elements. So we do have a picture or image of a cat on your website right here. What's happening very often is that people put an image on the website, but they do not describe the image in the alternative text. So the image itself, it does have the alt attribute where you can put alternative text to describe the image. So automated tools, what they will do is just check if you have alternative text, but they don't really tell you if it's like good or bad alternative text. So of course you can do that. You can put cat. But the thing is it really describing the image? Like, is it the same thing you see here? Or is it just saying it's a cat? Like, is it the cat like every other cat? Like, not really. I think usually when people look at that, they start to laugh. Like, they think it's funny. Or maybe even there are some people who think like, oh, that poor cat. Like, what are you doing to the cat? So it's a bit of your own opinion about what you think about it. However, someone who cannot see the image should have like the same impression actually. So they should get the same feeling from actually from that content you give them. So instead of just saying it's a cat, you should describe the image very well. So you could say like it's a black and white cat wearing violet roses in the hair and wearing a pink sunglasses, lying down on the floor. And depending on the content you do have on your website, you could say like it looks super cool. Maybe you want to express that by yourself, or you just leave it like, try to be very objective. Of course you can say like, oh, but is it really relevant for someone? Like to have that same, like to really know the whole description of the image, isn't it just for like an extra add-on to make someone laugh? But at that point, like, why shouldn't someone laugh just because you cannot see the image? You put the image because you want to express something, you want to add some extra content. So someone reading that can also laugh about it. It's the same like a little story you're telling. You can still explain what you see, and the person can decide if it's funny or think like, why would someone put a sunglass on a cat? Like, it's up to the person, but you have to describe it very well, because just cat is actually not really enough for alternative text. So yeah, all opinions are my own. Maybe the cat is funny, maybe it's not. Maybe this dog is ugly, maybe it's not. Maybe some people think that, but this breed exists, so there's a reason why this breed exists. Like, someone will like that dog. Maybe it's the favorite dog. So your goal actually is just to describe the image. It's not about saying ugly dog, or it's not about saying I don't know, weird dog or something like that. So I started to ask the AI. I didn't update it. Maybe the description would even be better right now, because I was curious if it would be giving me a good description actually that would work, or if it's like ugly dog, So I asked can you write alternative text for this image? And it gave me two alternatives. The first one was a hairless dog standing on a purple background. The dog has a long, slender body and a pointed head. Its skin is wrinkled and has pinkish gray color, and so on. I think this is a really good example of how to describe the image well. It's objective, it's just saying what you see on the image. It's really describing the image, and you can really imagine, even without seeing the image, what this image is about. And that's actually what alternative text should do. Also the second description, which gives you even the breed. So a Chinese crested dog, a hairless breed of dog, and so on. You will right now learn that this breed name looks like that. Or you can go to someone and say, hey, have you ever seen a Chinese crested dog? And they can maybe explain you. Or you can even look it up online, and then on Wikipedia there's maybe a description of what that dog looks like. So I think also this one is a good description. However, I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking right now. Can I now solve all of my accessibility problems? Maybe. I mean, I gave that talk once, and a lot of people were like, can just AI do that? Why do I have to adjust? Why can't AI do that for me? Well, I give you another example. So we have a cat image here, and it has a little butterfly on the nose. I should have made a bigger image, but I hope you can see it. It's not accessible. And I asked it, can you create an alternative text for this image for my cat blog? So I made it a bit more specific. I have a cat blog where I write about my cat and what it's doing and so on. And the answer was like, okay, of course, sure. And here's some alternative text you can use. So you have a curious cat with a butterfly on its nose, a cat enjoying a moment of peace with a butterfly, and so on, cat's fascination with a butterfly. So maybe there is a good alternative text you can use depending on what you're writing about on your website. So maybe, I don't know, you have like, you're talking about how curious your cat is and that it's like always looking for some adventure, and then you say like, my curious cat with a butterfly on its nose. However, what people are easy, they like to have quick solutions. What they will do if they maybe write about something really different and say, oh, I need an alternative text, I just asked the AI and I copy the first one I have and paste it so I'm done. That's usually how people work, right? So now imagine you write about your cat and you say how scared it is of insects. Like butterflies are the worst. Like butterflies scare him to hell. Like he really doesn't want to see butterflies. And then you want to show an example on how a butterfly once landed on his nose and he got super scared of it. And then you say, a curious cat with a butterfly on its nose. Or a cat enjoying a moment of peace with a butterfly. And maybe you will be like, yeah, but whatever, I have an alternative text. But people who will use, for example, a screen reader will be having that read out. They will be having like, oh, he's super scared of butterfly, and he's enjoying a moment of peace with a butterfly, which doesn't make sense. So I think AI can help a lot, but you should take care of like still try to reflect what it's actually giving you and how to use it. So here's another example. It was posted on LinkedIn by Kelly Ford. He's a screen reader user and he writes a lot about accessibility. And there's a tool which is created by Be My Eyes. It's actually, I think, called Be My AI. So it's using AI integration to explain what you see on what is actually displayed on an image. In this case, he made a picture of a landscape, and the answer was some explanation of what you see, and then it says a breathtaking landscape. I didn't put exactly the text he put here. However, who thinks that's a breathtaking landscape? Like 50-50, I would say right now here. But that's actually the point. Is it or is it not? In this case, it's just a nice opinion. It is an opinion. You can say it's breathtaking or it's not. But breathtaking is a really strong word, and that's what he's also talking about here. Like it gives the AI here gives some opinion about a picture where you don't really know if it's breathtaking or not, because it should actually just describe the image and not give some opinion. Why is that? This is an easy example, landscape, whatever. You can care about it or not. But it can give you like, it can really end up in worse ways if it shows pictures of political content, for example. Or if it's like about, I don't know, injuries or like really worse things. And it gives you a bit of opinion that can really reach, especially for alternative text. I hear it so often. Isn't there like a tool for it? Yes, it is. And I think it's okay to use it, but always take care if it's unopinionated feedback and if it's actually possible to get unopinionated feedback. And then also, does it fit the content context you're currently in? Like, do you have the content aligned to what the text says, or does it miss maybe the context of an image, or give it some context before, like if you use Bard or ChatGPT? So generally labeling, now we come to the opening, closing tag contents. So here we have an H tag. So it's an element A, opening, closing, and it's for a link. And inside it, it says click here. Who has seen a link with click here before? Yeah. So click here and then what? Like what's happening next? Do you know or do you know? More often like you have something you can see on the website and you know when you click here something will happen. But someone who does not see, or maybe it's not like the layout is a thing, like maybe he doesn't end up at the right element before, and it just says click here, doesn't know what's happening next. And maybe he ends up in a new window and is totally lost and doesn't know what it's about. So for links, it's super important to actually explain or to actually say what's happening next. So if you have like a blog about cats and dogs, you can say like, find out more about cats and dogs. Because the screen reader, taking that as an example for assistive technology, will tell you it's a link. And it will tell you, link, find out more about cats and dogs, which will make sense to you. However, again, design is a thing. You maybe don't want to end up with really long text like find out more about where la 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 la. You can, so this is like a little helper, you can always use area labels for links and then just overwrite the content. So content is what is in the middle between opening and closing tag. And it will actually be read out by the screen reader. So yeah, this is like a lot of people find that out when they hear accessibility. They'll be like, oh, there's area label. We have to label things. Let's put area label. And then they'd be like, oh, area is my best friend. You know, it's like your friend in need when you don't have an accessible website and you want to like improve it. But the truth is like there's a little problem with area and it's popping up more and more often. So one thing I want to say first, HTML and area is not the same. HTML is its own language. It's its own language, and area is something you can put on top of it. So just to give you an example, we have two buttons here, and the top I want to present like you put an attribute, which is area pressed, and can either be true or false. At the button, we have a button with disabled true or false. Do you see any difference in the two values of the attributes? So this one here is a string, and this one here is actually a Boolean. And that's something that's also happening very often, that just because you put true and false here, people think, oh, HTML, I just put true, or I just put area pressed without anything equal, and it will work the same way that HTML does. But it does not, because it's actually not the same. So what it does, area is like it's something you put on top of HTML, and it's just there to help you when there's no other way out. You have your HTML, you have semantics, you can create it like you did the whole DOM tree, and then from that, the whole accessibility tree will be created, and the whole accessible experience will happen. And then when you find places like little things missing that need to be adjusted to be accessible, there you can look up and see if you can add some area properties, states, or roles to adjust it and to have like a better accessible experience or a total full accessible experience. Yeah, also from the one I just showed you, I showed you statistics work. A lot of people started to improve their accessibility. So now in 2023, websites using area have more than 68% more detected errors than the ones who do not use area. It's a big percentage, like it's over 50%. And that's what I just said, like a lot of people tend to just say, okay, then I just put area label everywhere. And there's a saying that says, no area is actually better than bad area. You have to understand what it's about and how to use it and when to use it before like thinking that's your treasure and goal like for reaching the accessibility perfectism. So yeah, here's some examples of how not to do it. So what is area label for? It should label an element. Some people think, okay, area label will help me with accessibility. I put an area label at my button and I put something inside, so it's button. But what will happen in the end, again, screen reader will just say, it will announce the element, button, and then say again, button. But you have no idea about what the button actually does, because it's just button, button. And it's the same for link. Link, link, doesn't work that well. And then my favorite example also, again, click here. And then, because you need accessibility, and it's maybe funny to you, but it's something I saw in real life when I inspected the website. It's click here, and then we have to add accessibility. So let's put area label, click here, and great. So yeah, there are different rules of area. You can look them up, like there's several ones, but I present some of them to you. So there's the first rule of area, and it says if you have a native element, instead of using area row, state, property, please use this one. Meaning, why would you do that? You have a div, and now you want it to be a button, so you put row button. And then you end up with, oh, someone should click it, so you add a lot of JavaScript. And then you'll be like, oh, we have to make it accessible, so now we need keyboard accessibility, so it has to be clickable, like you can use it by space and enter and so on. And you have a lot of things you have to add, and you have to add all the properties and things like that. So keep in mind, things have to be keyboard accessible. It's also like, when you look it up actually, area, you will see that it tells you that already as a warning on the ambient side. It tells you, please use rather the romantically correct semantic HTML, which can be romantic, of course, over using area. Why is that? That's just the example I gave. Before you end up like adding roles and a lot of JavaScript and things like that, just use the right semantic because it has everything built in. And you really don't have to do a lot of work, and you just have your semantic element, which does everything that there's a reason for why this element exists, actually. So let's talk about cat balls. This is the background image, and I put some text on top of it. And this is an example of, again, why we shouldn't like adjust too many elements. So we put a background image here as a class, and there's the image. Of course, we have area label cat because it's a cat. Don't do that. And then we have a span which says cat boss. I removed the link in the example, so never mind. However, we put role image because it's an image, right? And to make it accessible, we should add a role, and we add role image. So what can go wrong? What can go wrong in that case? You look in the accessibility tree, actually, in Chrome DevTools, you can do that. And it will tell you, okay, you have image here. This will be announced like that, which is a cat, and the static text inside it says cat box. Anyone already knows where this is going? Okay. So now the next question. Who has seen HTML code like that before? I think the image already tells you not to lift your hand, right? So who has ever seen anything in an open and closing tag of an image? No, because it's not there, like it doesn't exist. An image is a self-closing element. It's just the container where you link an image to that should be displayed. There's no way that can ever happen. But that's what you actually just did with adding the row. So it's just especially that what I want to point out, like it can help you, but it can really like go wrong and mess up the code, because in this case, this is actually not the way it should work, or it actually can work. Yeah. So the second rule of area: do not change native semantics unless you really have to. So instead of using H2, for example, because you want the size of the H2 that is default per CSS, and you have different tabs on your website, and you put role tab everywhere, just use an element that does not have a semantic, like the div, and add the role tab, which makes way more sense. And then respect the order. You can inspect elements in Chrome, also Firefox, for example, and you will see the name, this one here, is the one that actually goes in the accessibility tree and will be read out. I always use Screen Reader as an example, but there are different assistive technologies. So yeah, the name is the one that's important in the end. Usually it's this way up. You have a title, and this one will be read out. You have content, which is between opening and closing tag for interactive elements like links or buttons. And then you have area label, which will override this. And then you have area labeled by, who does override this as well. Who does not know what area labeled by is? Okay. Imagine you have like an element and you want to label it, but you don't want to put area label itself, rather than label it by a title that is present on the website. So you link it to another element. So you have an ID on an element where the description lives, and you link it to area labeled by. So an area labeled by, you can just put the ID. Yeah. So we have an image here, and we give it the alternative text black dog. In this case, it would be the content. And we can see that in the name here is black dog because I put it as an alternative text. Then I want to make it more accessible. I add a title, which is dog. which doesn't do anything in this case because it will just be overruled by the alternative text here, and you again end up with black dog here. Then I add my area label, of course, again black dog, which just overrides again the alternative text, and we again end up with black dog, but with the one of the area label, which doesn't make sense, as you've seen before, because we already had that. This is just a starter for this one. you know this icon now, add to cart. Okay, so this is an icon button, add to cart, and usually it works like that. You have a button, and inside there's like an SVG, which displays these little card with the add sign in this case. So how would you make this one actually accessible? Anyone has an idea? Later. Well, first of all, a lot of people want to do area hidden true. Area hidden does actually hide elements from the accessibility tree, so it's not read out. In this case, when not having any label added, it makes sense because maybe some of you remember, but if you have a button or a link, what is like going into the accessibility tree is the content. And the content lives between the opening and the closing. So what will be read out here is the whole SVG. And the longer the SVG, the longer the conversation is going nowhere. So you have a lot of text read out, which doesn't help anyone. So what you can do to avoid that is actually add area hidden true. But in this case, is the question, does it really make sense? Because we do not have any other text that will be read out. What you can do is like add text. So we have content. The content now would be the SVG itself, which we hide from the accessibility tree. And then below that we put add to cart, which is actually saying add to cart. And this would be like an icon button with text below, or maybe the text will be hidden if you put it in a span. This would work like icon buttons with text, but what we want is no text, right? So what we already had. Now we can use area label. Here it makes sense. You already see a hint here that it's still wrong, but we add area label to the button and say add to cart, and we get rid of the add to cart in the content. So now we do have like the first step into the right direction, but this is where most people end up. This is like the state where they usually be like, I have an SVG, I have to put area hidden. I have the area label, so I put a label there and fly away. But the truth is like, you don't need the area hidden anymore. And that's because of the overruling. Because right now the area label is like on top and the content will not be read out anymore. Still take care, you're not working alone on the content and the whole project. If you have other developers who will ever change the code, they might end up with removing the area label because they want to do something else, and then suddenly you might need the area hidden. But if you do have area label here, you will not need the area hidden. If you remove the area label, you will need the area hidden and some other text. Yeah. Probably you think like, oh, accessibility is so hard. I don't want to do that. So why can't I just use automated testing? You know, I covered the AI part already, so now that. The other question I always get. Of course, you can use automated testing as a helping tool. It's good like for inspecting errors. It's good. Also, I heard great talks and some courses where they actually use automated testing for learning accessibility to actually see the error mistakes and see how to improve it. But the thing is, like, we always like time is money, time management, testing workflow, and the graphic I showed you in the beginning. Like, we write tons of code, a lot. And then in the end, we start testing for accessibility. Then we correct the errors. And then we rewrite the code, which is mostly just using the right semantic HTML or like just using the correct attributes and things like that. And then we repeat all the steps every time new code is added. It's not done there. Like, it's not added and, you know, again. No, it's like you would do that every time again. While instead of, you can just write accessible code, honestly, write correct code, and then test for accessibility, see if there's still something left over, like some things you should improve, and then correct small errors, make adjustments, and then keep going with the project and do that again. which is way faster and saves you a lot of time, and also is like a way nicer testing workflow. So yeah, I think this title of the talk, just like the citation I showed you before, this is the title of the talk, Preventing Accessibility Issues Instead of Fixing Them, is actually the motto that everyone should have. And keep in mind, you want to add the magic along the way. So you make a website accessible, okay, but it's not some magic you add in the end, it's some magic you add all the time to make it accessible. And if you want to really create an accessible experience, you should use semantic elements. You should use ARIA, of course, at some point, but rethink when to use ARIA and how to use it. Use proper and correct ARIA properties, states, roles. Learn it, implement it the best way. Test it if you like. You can then correct it and then do it again. Be very objective when describing. Try to really just describe what you see, not to add too much opinion, just if it makes sense. If you're writing a critical article and want to add your opinion about something, it might make sense. Then inspiration by AI is always allowed, but it's not the power tool for everything. And try to use good resources. Because, as I said, for example, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, there's a lot to read about accessibility as well. And other resources also give you a lot of good information about accessibility. And that's it. If you have any questions, you can ask right now. I gotta say, that's it for this talk, but there's more to come. But we do a little questioning round now.
Yeah, and then afterwards we're looking at our Orbit website and check which accessibility errors we have. But there was one question over here during the talk.
Yes,
do you still have it?
Mine, no, actually, she
No?
actually answered it.
Okay,
All right,
perfect.
we had that question then, right? No.
So right before you showed that we can use AI, I wrote down, would you recommend using AI tools to generate alt text? Or can alt text also be too long? Because
Yes.
when I generate alt text, it always feels like a whole book, and I don't know where to cut it off. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, like there's a number. There's like a certain number of words you can use. I think it's 1,000 words you can use. The pizza's coming. Pizza. Yeah, so you can, I mean, it's still a lot of words you can use, but like always, try to describe it shortly and like objective and also very well. But if you need extra words, use them to make a better description. But try not to add a whole storybook. Like I can, for example, I have a picture of a dog sitting in front of a fence, like having little flowers in the hair. I don't know. And you'll be like, the dog is sitting on a gray ground, and it's having like little feet, and sometimes it's looking to the right, but on this picture it's looking straight forward, and his eyes are blue, and you know the hair is like that, and you keep explaining too much things. Is it really relevant? That's always the question. Like you can add a lot of description, but is it relevant? That's the main.
All right. Is there another question, or can I? Okay.
My question would be, what is a good workflow for getting the stuff right? I mean, this was the technical aspects and like sprinkling the stuff in, but as a whole thing. So when I'm testing with screen readers, it's so alien. It's not really useful for me. I feeling like I'm blind then, but it doesn't help in the process. So, do you have recommendations for how to tackle really the right spots and get a feeling for it if it's done correctly in the whole thing?
Yeah, like always, I would say practice, of course. It's one thing, but what I think is a good idea always to review each other. And so one person should really review only the accessibility part and can really say this and that should be added, not. And you can always answer why, and then you can look up why, and the next time you know. And then you can, of course, as I said, implement testing. So you know, okay, something is off here, and I have to correct it. And then, like the tool I will just show you in a minute, that will actually give you some resources where you can look, and then it will tell you, okay, you have to adjust it because of this and that. And you will learn along the way, so practice how to actually implement well. However, personally, I think manual testing is still like the best approach you can do, because there are some things you cannot test automated. So manual testing, like tabbing through a website, seeing actually if everything makes sense, asking different people if it makes sense, like the whole structure. It doesn't have to be only like for the screen reader, also for everyone. Like ask people, do you think the structure of the website makes sense? And still screen reader testing, I think, is important. So I know that it's maybe not the best or ideal way, but after time, I think you get a sense of how to put elements or how to actually work through that, like with the area label, for example, when to use it, when not. And with the review process, you will get better in that. So to answer it short, write the code, try to check yourself, is it accessible or not? Try to learn about it at the same time. Then try to implement testing. It will tell you, no, you cannot, I don't know, push, merge, or whatever flow you want to do. Then you will have to check why it's not correct in that way. Then you double check with someone who's actually also checking accessibility manually in the code or in the application. And before you release it, I would actually recommend to let someone test it who is really experienced with a screen reader and needs a screen reader. Because as you say, for you, it might not make sense, but there's like user groups who do testing for companies or for developers that offer their service for that, if you don't want to do it yourself. Or someone once had an intern, they were like covering their eyes and said, use the screen reader and test it.
Thanks.
Should we do one more question and then pizza and more questions, and afterwards we look at the website?
Well, let's look at the website and then, because, the pizza's there already.
Yeah.
I just said it, yeah. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so one more question.
You can. I already got
three, so okay, on.
Choose one.
Choose wisely. Oh.
Now I'm under pressure.
Pressure.
I would like to connect to this question. So what does everybody in the project need to do right in the whole process of building the website? Like it starts off with design or with the concept and so on, but there is things like, for example, they used Figma, for example, and then they should have extensions in there, yes, and so on. And are there more examples along the way you can?
Yeah, like for example, Figma has like extensions. Also, there's like some color tools, or I don't remember it right now. I had it once. Like there's a website with a lot of color themes, like just color themes that are accessible, and also with popular color themes, which I really love. I tried to look it up in a minute. It's really cool. Like you have everything well set up. Well, first of all, everyone should be aware about it. I think that's the biggest step. Like everyone should be aware about it and should or want to work on it, because and at that point when you want to work on it or want to be aware about it, you get more interested and try to make it more accessible. Then of course try to get some helping tools, like PowerPoint has a built-in tool for that. You can use AI like for the development process as well. You can ask there as well. It doesn't work that well in the end, but it gives you some hints and it's already improving. Yeah, like you're developing, I would add tests if it helps you. If you feel like they're annoying, try to learn it yourself. And try to test manually, try to make sure, I mean, for Flutter, for example, iOS, like iPhone and Android, they have really good screen readers. You can like try to learn them and test with them. And yeah. I mean, it depends a bit on what you like. I mean, I usually would say I would prefer manually testing, but I know that's a bit against the productive way of thinking most people have. But at the same time, if you are aware about accessibility, and there's a certain culture and people know it should be accessible, or they reach for really high, good, clean code, you will end up with accessible applications anyway. So it's all about a bit about standard and then trying to find your way through that.
Okay, maybe a quick follow-up.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, it wasn't a joke. Just give me quick.
What's your favorite way to establish it inside the team? Like, at some point, awareness needs to be there, and like, do you do workshop? Would you recommend workshop, and so on?
Should I answer? Yeah, I did a lot of workshops, and I also, as I mentioned, reviews are super important. If you say that's not correct, because it is not accessible, yeah, like the way I learned it, it's like if the project is not accessible, it's not done, or it's not correct. And if you feel like implementing that kind of strategy or kind of way of thinking, it will work out very well, I think. But in the end, people need to be educated as well. So workshops, of course, work. And if you have someone who's really into that topic, starting with the workshop, try to actually not say, oh, that's nice, I like it. You're going to check everything now, because you don't want that person to leave or burn out. You want to actually learn something and then also implement it. So maybe ask him to, or she, or him and her. Him, her, and them, to actually do the reviews, for example. And then at some point start to add more people who do the review. Just don't leave the person alone, but try to implement it or make the person help in a really efficient way.
Very sorry to cut it here, but it's just a pause. You can continue your questions and answers during the pizza. But for now, we say goodbye to the live stream. Thanks for joining, and we will continue after the pizza.